Okay, welcome back. This is the pre-Bereishis sermon. There once, there once was a couple. They got into a fight, and for the half of the day, they didn't talk to each other. Not a word. In the morning, the husband had to catch a flight from the airport very early in the morning, and so he left a note for his wife, saying, "If I'm not up by 5 o'clock, wake me up in the morning because I don't want to miss my flight." At 10:30 in the morning, he wakes up and he is in a huge shock and right away becomes very, very angry. And then he looks over and he sees on the pillow next to his head is a note that says, "Honey, it's 5 o'clock, time to get up." Humanity can be divided into two groups, basically. You have morning people and you have night people. What's morning people? Morning people are the people that they get up with so much energy, so chipper. As soon as the dawn breaks across the horizon. Who are the nighttime people? The nighttime people, they're the ones that are already, they're just waking up. Well, the nighttime people, they're the ones that are only going to sleep when dawn breaks across the horizon. Morning people, at 5:15 in the morning, they're already opening their doors, they're getting the newspaper, they're drinking their coffee, they by a quarter to six, they're the people that are unlocking the shul. By 7:30, they're already at work. By 1:30 in the afternoon, they need a nap. They had a busy morning. They accomplished a lot of things in the office, and now it's time for a little rest. As soon as Ma'ariv is over, they're counting the minutes till they can go to sleep. If you call them after 10 o'clock at night, you get a lecture. Nighttime people, on the other hand, it's exactly the opposite. They start their day when the sun goes down. When the rest of the world turns quiet, that's when these people come alive. You won't see them in the office until 10 o'clock in the morning. And even then they come in, their eyes are bloodshot. The hair is a mess. If somebody would try to rouse them at 9 o'clock, it's very grumpy. It's not very pleasant. But towards the afternoon, they start coming around, they start finding themselves, and they work all night. Those are the last people to leave the office. It's 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night. They start answering emails. They start returning your phone call. Some of us know these people. And it's fine. The world is divided into two kinds. You want to know what group you belong to? Ask yourself a simple question. When Corona hit and there was nowhere to go, what time did you get up? Morning people were out jogging at 5:30 in the morning. Corona, schmarona, it didn't matter. After 5:30, they can't stay in bed. Some of us, I'm not going to say who, when there was nowhere to go, the eyelids didn't open until 10:30, 11:30. A very simple calculation. You can figure out which group you belong to. The biggest challenge is when you have a day person, a morning person married to a night person. Yeah, it's always an argument then. The morning person is always upset that the other one's not helping them get the kids ready for school in the morning. And the night person is always upset at the other because you run out of energy just as I'm revving up and getting ready to go to work. Question is, what did Hashem set up? When the world was created, is this a morning world, or is this a night world? Is this a chipper in the morning kind of world that the world started with great energy, or is this a world where we only get to work in the nighttime? It's very simple. It's very clear. In the first chapter of the Torah, The answer is repeated 6 times. It was evening, and then it was morning. That's the first day. Each day worked in that cycle, which means, so the first day of creation is the 25th of the Hebrew month of Elul. So when did the world begin? On the evening after the 24th. The sun set on the 24th, so to speak. The sun hadn't been created yet. But as the theoretical sun of the 24th set, the world emerges into existence, and God gets to work creating light and dark on that first day of creation. And then towards the evening of that first day, God says, it was evening, it was morning. That's one day. And the second day begins, and God goes to work on separating the waters. And on the eve of the 26th, God says, Vayhi erev, vayhi boker. This is the end of that day. It was an evening, and then there was a morning. That's the second day. And he goes to work on the third. And that's how it went all through the system of creation. The world begins in the evening time. And it doesn't end with God's creation. The Jewish calendar works that way. Every Jew lives that way. In this way, we're different than the rest of the world, really, in that everything starts in the evening time when the sun sets. When the sun goes down, the next day begins. That's why Shabbat candles, you light them on the holiday candles, you light them at sunset. The fast of Yom Kippur begins at sunset. And it's not uncommon that people make mistakes because of this, where you have people showing up on a day late or a morning too soon, because it says the holiday begins on a certain date, and they're not sure if it means the evening before or the morning of. So obviously this is a strange way to organize time. Yeah, why should you start the following day when you just finished dinner and you're still wrapping up the projects of yesterday? Yeah, the secular calendar seems to be more logical than this, where the days are split at midnight, because that's generally the way humanity will work. You work all day on your projects, and you're finishing up, and then into the night you finish up whatever you were working on during the day, and then you lay down to sleep. And when you wake up in the morning, you expect it. Psychologically, going to bed is already the beginning of the next day. You're preparing for the next day. So midnight seems to be the logical place to break up the days. What's the secret? What's the mystery behind the fact that Torah and Judaism counts the days beginning with the evening, beginning with the sunset, beginning with the stars coming out? So it was actually in 1951 that the Lubavitcher Rebbe explained, or he found in this phenomena, the essence of life in this world. And there is no greater introduction, there is no greater opening for the Torah, for the book of Genesis, with all of its struggles and with all of its tragedies, than this. It was evening first, and then it was morning. That's a day. It was a bright sunny morning in the land called Pumbedisa in Babylonia, which modern day Iraq, I believe. This was a great city. It was the city that was the center of Jewish intellectual work. It was the place where the Babylonian Talmud, mostly famously known as just the Talmud, was written. And there, two great rabbis met each other. Rabbi Zera, phenomenal mind, fantastic rabbi, fantastic scholar. He met the head of the academy, Rav Yehuda. Each was in a good mood. Their minds were clear. It was early in the morning. And Rabbi Zera asked Rabbi Yehuda a certain out-of-the-box question. He said, with all due respect, I noticed that when you have flocks traveling together and the sheep are going slowly, the goats run out ahead. Why is it, Rebbe, that the goats take the lead and the sheep follow? Rav Yehuda did not get disconcerted by this seemingly strange, out of the ordinary question. And he answered very seriously. He said, goats are darker and the sheep are lighter because of the white, beautiful wool that they have. And in this world, darkness comes before light. Why does Jewish tradition carry this story forward so that we know it even till today? It's not just a story about sheep and goats. Sheep and goats. This is the story of life itself. God began his work of creation at night, and night was followed by morning in order to give us this lesson. In the end, it'll be good. In the end, we will have light. But to get there is a very long road. Hashem did not create a bright world. Hashem did not create a world that was all lit up and perfect. Hashem created a world that is like the factory in which we will create light. This is a creation, this is a reality that begins in darkness and in struggle and in failure. And you fall and you fail and you mess it up and again and again. But in every cycle, in every round, you fall and you get up. And then the next time you fall, but you're farther ahead than you were before. You've advanced. You've achieved a new step, a new level, a new clarity. This is actually expressed in the Parsha of Bereishis that we're going to read in Shul this week. We see at the beginning of the history of humanity, in the book of Genesis, we see 5 rounds, and even into the book of Exodus, we see 5 rounds of sibling rivalry, 5 rounds of darkness, but you see, and at each one, there's failure, but the failure is not quite so terrible as the previous one. Let's go through them. The first tragedy, the first tragic story in the Torah is 2 brothers, Cain and Abel, Cain and Hevel. They're in a fight with each other. There's jealousy between them. They don't know how to behave like mensches. They never had any practice. And the sibling rivalry ends in the murder, where one brother murders his brother. It's hard to believe. How could God create such evil? How could he allow such evil to exist in his world? But that's only a part of the story. Turn a few pages. What do you see? There's another example of sibling rivalry. You have Ishmael and Yitzchak, each one vying for their father's favor, each one vying to be the primary inheritor of Abraham's wealth and spiritual achievement. And in the beginning, there's a terrible fight. And how does it end? Not in murder. That was only the first time. This time it ends in separation. The 2 brothers have to go their separate ways, and they live the rest of their lives apart from each other. That's advancement. That's achievement. We're getting places. There's forgiveness. There's reconciliation, at least to a degree. There's a third episode of sibling rivalry, and that is where Jacob steals the blessings from his brother Esau, and he has to flee, and he does, and he lives for 34 years apart from each other. Jacob and Esau, Yaakov and Esau. He lives 34 years by his uncle Lavan, but eventually the end of the story is that they meet up with each other, and there's a tremendous and emotional, beautiful reconciliation. They embrace and they kiss, and they're exchanging gifts, and each one is offering the other one that they should go together and live together. They don't end up living together, but there is a very emotional and loving reconciliation. That's advancement. That's progress. There's a fourth example, and that is Joseph and his brothers, Yosef and the 12 tribes, the 10 tribes, those who sold him. They abused him terribly. In the end, there is complete and total forgiveness. Yosef forgives his brothers and he sustains them for years. They live on his dime, under his care. That's a beautiful story. That's progress. The world is getting better. We're learning how to be mensches. And then there's a fifth story, and that's the story of Moses and Aaron. As a child, Moses was taken to the palace of Pharaoh and raised there. He was educated. He got the best education money could buy in the palace of Pharaoh. Who was leading the people? Who was the father figure to the nation of Israel? First, it was the father of Moses, Amram, and then it was the brother of Moses, Aaron. These were the leaders of the people while Moshe was MIA in the king's palace. And later he had to flee the country. He lived in Midian for many years, a total of 62, I believe. Who was leading the people then? Aaron was leading the people. And then God designates Moshe as the new leader, stripping Aaron of his position, and Aaron is not jealous for a minute. When's the Kiddush? Aaron was celebrating. Aaron was excited for Moshe's new position and wished him success. This is the world that we live in. And very often, it's not uncommon that people ask, is this world getting better, or are we going back to the dark ages? Are we closer to Mashiach, or are we farther and farther away? There's a saying, you want to know how bad the world is? Read the newspapers. You want to know how good the world is? Read the history books. It wasn't long ago that the world was a violent place, full of murder and theft and abuse. Today, as crazy as this world is, and murder and violence and theft is the exception to the rule. It used to be the rule. Peaceful times used to be the exception. Warmongers used to be the rule. Today, warmongering is the exception to the rule. In the old days, war was something people looked forward to. Not anymore. Today, we look forward to caring for each other, helping each other, living peacefully with our families and our friends and our neighbors. And strangers we don't know, we like to say, good morning, how are you? We see a person in need, we want to help them. It's a crazy world right now. But that's the circle of progress. That's the wheel of progress. We fall down, but the hard times will come and go. The goodness that we learn in these hard times will stay with us forever, and we will advance further and further and further into the beautiful future that awaits us. There's a story that the great famous lecturer Simon Jacobson tells about his father. His father is Gershom Ber Jacobson. He was a reporter for the Israeli newspaper Yediot Acharonot, and also he was the editor-in-chief of the Yiddish American newspaper, the Allgemeiner Journal. He says as a media man, he had a media pass, which gave him access to all kinds of secret places. And for Chabad Lubavitch, which was heavily involved in the well-being and in the Jewish upkeeping the Judaism of the Soviet Union, that pass was very, very valuable. And so Gershom Ber Jacobson was sent with Jewish articles to fill in holy books, Jewish books, for the Jewish people that were still held behind the Iron Curtain of the Soviet Union. And in 1971, he returned from such an excursion, bringing Jewish artifacts to the Jewish people in the Soviet Union, and it was called for a meeting in the Rebbe's office. And the Rebbe, a debriefing, literally, and the meeting lasted for hours. And the Rebbe grilled him. The Rebbe wanted to know every detail. And he told him story after story after story about the suffering and the pain, the deprivations of the Jewish community in the Soviet Union. And with every story, the Rebbe's face fell further, and the Rebbe's mood became more more pained, more anguished. The meeting went all night. And as the sun broke over the horizon, the Rebbe stood up and pulled back the curtains on the windows in his office. And Rabbi Jacobson and Gershon Ber Jacobson says the Rebbe's whole demeanor changed. His face broke into a pleasant smile, and his body language relaxed. And the Rebbe said, "Ah, it's a new day." To go from such pain to such optimism is in fact something the Rebbe was very unique in. And the Rebbe once confessed to a dear chassid of his, to a dear follower, Rabbi Beryl Eunuch. He said, this was something I actually had to work on. I had to develop this trait in myself, to see things in a positive light, or I could not survive. So now we understand the mystery of evening before morning. That's the story of life. The struggle comes before the light, but the light will come. But now we also understand another thing. As the signature, as the closing remark on the whole story of creation, God looks at all of the beautiful things he created and he says, this is very good. Very good. Throughout the project, God was saying, this is good. At the end, he says, this is very good. Compare that to a story that the Talmud brings, where the academies, meaning the scholars under the banner of Hillel's academy, debated the scholars of Shammai's academy for about 2 years, 2.5 years. They debated the question, is it better for man to be born or not to be born? And after 30 months, they published their findings. And their conclusion was, it's better for man to never have been born. If you would ask us, we would not accept. It's very surprising. How could it be that God believes his world is very good, but the scholars, the sages of the Talmud, believe that it's not worth it, that it's not worth it, that it would be better to never have been created, it would be better to never have been born? What's going on here? Well, it's basically based on the same principle. Life is not easy. Life is not necessarily pleasant, but life is very good. Our joy, our wealth, our good fortune is not something that comes to us easily. It's not something delivered on a silver platter. And that's why the sages say it would be more pleasant for man to not have been born, because life on earth is not necessarily pleasant. It's not easy. It would be much easier not to be born. It's not easy to be born. But every once in a while, when we close our mouths, we control ourselves, we withhold a sharp response, we improve our character trait, we develop ourselves, we become more menschlich. That's when we taste the same flavor that God felt when he looked at his world at the end, when the project was complete. It's a sense of victory. It's a sense of achievement. I've done something. And that feels very good. It's a long road, but it's worth it. A worldly example. There was this is a story that is told not from Jewish sources, but it's a good story. A man in the village, the village water carrier, had a pole with 2 buckets that he would take to the well, and then he would bring it back to his house. And one of his buckets was perfect, whole, and the other bucket was imperfect. It had a hole. And the broken bucket felt badly about itself and once complained to the water carrier, maybe you should just replace me. I don't do a good job for you. By the time you get home, I've leaked half of the water. And the water carrier takes the bucket back to the well and gives him a tour of the road home. And he shows him on one side of the road, there's beautiful flowers, and on the other side of the road, there's dirt, nothing, barren. And the water carrier said, "Years ago, I saw you for what you were, and in response to your imperfection, I planted the seeds of these flowers. And for years, as we walk home, these flowers are watered and made beautiful by your imperfection. And for years, I take those flowers and I decorate our Shabbos table with them. If not for you being exactly who you are, we wouldn't have that beauty in the world." So now, after all of this time, after all of this work, 5,780 years of progress, of human achievement, of learning Menschlichkeit, of perfect imperfection, all that remains is to pray the words that are the acronym for this Hebrew year, Tehei Shnas Peloes Arenu. May this year be the year when God will show us the most amazing wonders, literally and very soon. Thank you for joining. I wish you a wonderful Shabbos and a wonderful new year.